Hi, everybody. Welcome. I can see everyone's making their way in. We're going to give it just a minute or two before we get underway, but it's great to have you all coming on to the call today. It's great to see so many people entering so early. This is good. Just for the new joiners that are coming in, as I can see the attendee list growing, we're just going to give it a minute to get everybody, as many people in as possible before we get underway. And yeah, I think we can start in just a second. I think I'm going to see if we can get to the 90 mark. I'm going to count us down to 90 attendees, and then we're going to fire away. 4 more to go. Now, only if this was a live YouTube session, I could say smash that like button, but can't do that here on Zoom. Maybe they should bring that in. There we go. We're at 90. All right, I think we can get underway. Welcome, everybody. It's really great to have you all here on the call today. Really looking forward to bringing this topic to you. This is a fireside chat, so very much an open discussion with my lovely panelist colleagues on the call today. And we're going to be talking about alumni metrics and engagement metrics. And we're saying aren't just for counting anymore. So we're going to be looking to unpack that as we go along in the conversation. Now, this is a conversational webinar, so we're not going to be putting slides or demonstrations or anything like that. You'll pretty much just be listening to us talk about this topic. However, we do encourage your participation. So for those that are on the call and do have some questions, we do have a Q&A box that I would encourage you to submit through there. As you can see already, we've got our lovely folks in the background here on Hivebrite posting through there. So anybody has a question, feel free to drop it in that box. We may not have time to get to it during the conversation. If we can, we will. If not, we do have time at the end where we're going to try and answer as many as we can. If we don't have time to get to your question, it doesn't mean it's not important. We will get back to you via email as quickly as possible on that. So without further ado, let's do it. Sandra, Barney, welcome. It's great to have you both here. Thank you. I know you're on opposite ends of the world, actually. So it's great to have so many people in different time zones on the call. So for those that don't know who these lovely panelists are, allow me to introduce them and give them a second as well. Barney Ellis-Perry, thank you for being here on the call with us. Very much looking to hear your expertise on this topic. For those that don't know, Barney's actually been in the advancement world for over 30 years, and 20 and 20 of those years has been specifically focused on higher education. Originally hails from Canada, so don't hold that against him, though he's now living in LA, though interestingly moving to Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm curious about your thoughts from moving from avocado on toast to some fried chicken. I think that's going to be interesting. And then you're going to be ramping up a new role as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Alumni Engagement and Annual Giving at Vanderbilt University. So congratulations on that, and welcome to the call. Welcome to the awesome. Chat. You've already been up early, though, as you told me before. You've been up and rowing, haven't you? So you're fresh and ready to go. Yeah.
5:30 this morning. It was good.
5:30 this morning. Love it. And Sandra, on the opposite end of the world, hailing from Sandra Rincon, hailing from, at the moment, in the south of Spain at Malaga. Very jealous of her view on the beach. So Sandra has actually been in international education for over 30 years. The last 20 years has been focused more on engagement in higher education. Working with a lot of various international governmental organizations. But currently, I believe, Sandra, you're working with the EU Alumni Initiative and the Netherlands Alumni Network. You're sort of heading that and co-writing NAFSA's first book on international alumni, titled Engaging International Alumni as a Strategic Partner, which I think is coming out spring of this year. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Very exciting.
We're excited about that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I have to say, I'm a little jealous of your weather right now because I'm in New York and I had to get up this morning and go out in about 23-degree temperature, where I think you're probably hitting the 70s and the 80s. Is that right?
That's about right, but it's been raining, so so not to
It's
make you
not.
too jealous about
It's not.
it.
It's not. It's not all sunshine and margaritas.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I thought let's do it. Let's rip off the Band-Aid and sort of get right into the topic. I'm going to throw you both on the hot seat with kind of trying to define engagement. I know that a lot of teams out there in education, whether that's corporate, alumni, or higher education institutions, sort of want to come up with their own power paragraph of what engagement means. We've all been in those workshops. What I thought I'd do is take Case's definition to kick us off today on the call and sort of work from that. And I want to get your opinion, whether you would like to add anything to this, change anything. And I'll read that verbatim and then you can tell me, and I'll start us off with this. So how Case defines it is they say that activities that are valued by, the engagement is activities that are valued by alumni, build enduring and mutually beneficial relationships, inspire loyalty and financial support, strengthen the institution's reputation, and involve alumni in meaningful activities to advance the institution's mission. It means a lot of different things there. So I'd love to hear from you and sort of what you would take on that from Case's definition.
Well, I mean, I like the definition, and I like the fact that it starts with activities that are valued by alumni, because a lot of times, in institutions, we tend to focus a lot in terms of what we need. We need, I mean, I've been in international alumni relations, and connecting that with the strategy of internationalization. We usually needed more international students, more primarily branding the university abroad and whatnot. And we forget a lot of times, what are the needs of alumni and their interests. So we sometimes forget that this is about like they say, it's about a mutual beneficial relationship, right? So that I think it's right on. The part where I'm not sure that has no clarity, or maybe it's the part about loyalty and building that loyalty. I hope that it's not exclusively to support, to build financial support, but alumni can donate so much time and knowledge, expertise, that sometimes we don't tap on it and we don't count it either. So hopefully universities also focus on that part of measuring that. That's
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Barney, what about for yourself?
I love where Sandra's going about that loyalty, and that has to be more. I mean, it's good old fashioned time, talent, and treasure. I really think that the Case rubrics of the 4 areas is fantastic, and I'm just so excited that we got to this place. Really excited that they're now doing the benchmarking survey that started in 2019. So all of this is really, really good. But I do think, sort of to Sandra's point, that we have to then take the institutional lens, and that lens being the institutional strategic plan. What is important for that institution, and to build their metrics program, to build their strategy in, their alumni engagement strategy and constituent engagement in line, in support of that overall strategy. And then it's customized, because the Case work that Sandra and I both have friends who are very involved in that from all over the world, but it's a very, very wide definition. And because it has to involve support K-12, colleges, all levels of universities, et cetera. So it, just by its nature, it has to be, big and in effect a bit vague. So you need to take that, and I really believe everyone should work within that construct, and then develop what's right for them.
Well, I think that's
way beyond philanthropy. Like, philanthropy is only one of the 4 pillars of it, right? So it's really important to look at that, because eventually you want your data to be able to tell you which volunteers you should go to ask for specific appeals for engagement, just like you do with donors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I want to circle back to this a little bit later in the conversation around the universal framework piece of it, Barney, if we can, and Sandra, because I think there's some interesting things in there, and from what I've seen and talking to different universities, and how that can be applied, because we all know that universities differ, and K through 12s and colleges and they all differ from shapes and sizes, right? For depending on department size, how many alumni they have, are they chapter focused? So I'd like to table that framework piece of it and come back to that a little bit later. But I want to build on this. There's been a lot of professionalization of the advancement department, more specifically alumni offices. I wonder if you think this has been driven from university missions just in general about building loyalty and support through time, talent, and treasure, though through more of needing to look at alumni relations through a business lens. That kind of like popped into my mind as we were talking about that. And I've seen it in the last 10 years myself, but you both have more experience and probably have seen this even more so. Barney, you in the US, and Sandra, you in Europe. Some thoughts or comments on that?
Sure, I'll jump in and then Sandra can take it to the next level. You're absolutely right. Of course, there is this. We are seeing a massive, I would say a refocus on the larger constituent base of institutions, because for most of the big organizations, their donor pipeline is quite thin. And having worked for a large consulting company all over the world, I can tell you, every report we gave clients pretty much said your pipeline's thin. So development is very much a driver in this. So let's not pretend it's otherwise, but that is driving an investment. And the conversation is, I think, getting more mature around if we properly engage people in a really meaningful way to their values, they will eventually donate, but they're also going to do all these other really value-added things. So Sandra, talked earlier about international recruitment. Alumni can play just a pivotal role in that, and in supporting those international students when they go back, if they're, go back to their countries, et cetera, for careers, et cetera. So I think the conversation and more finances have come into alumni relations because of fundraising, but it is really having a big ripple effect, and we are really realizing we have to engage the whole person in order to really power up the mission of the institution.
Yeah, well said. Sandra, how about for you?
I mean, and this is where engaging volunteers or alumni as volunteers is so important, because a lot of times this is their first step of moving towards eventually donating. And there's been some academic research, showing that indeed engaging them as volunteers because they're donating from their heart. Really, it's a strong bond. So what universities also need to do is build programs where you can move up volunteers, to offer different opportunities for them to continue volunteering. So yeah, I agree with you, Barney, and that the aspect of volunteering being very meaningful.
Yeah, and the professionalization of alumni offices as well, departments. You see that shifting over time. Great. Well, let's dive into sort of the second part of this, and this is going to be more directed to Barney. Though Sandra, I do want you to jump in as you can, and where you see fit. And Barney, a couple of specific questions for you, and this is just some research we've seen. We see around about between 60 to 70% of our clients that are sort of tracking alumni engagement, and I kind of mentioned it there as sort of as a kind of forebearer to this question around the professionalization of alumni and advancement offices. We see they're getting more sophisticated around capturing alumni metrics, but where do you see this going from here? There's been this shift of like collecting data and kind of really looking at the numbers, but I'd love to hear from you where you see this next step and next evolution.
Well, it's an exciting time. And the fact that 70% of your clients are doing that, like this sort of concept really only goes back, less than 20 years. And I was fortunate to be at the University of British Columbia, and we were one of the first of a cohort of institutions setting up a metrics program. So it's been really fun to see it evolve and morph. And so the fact that we're getting that many of your clients are doing it, the fact that CASE has now done all this great work, means that we're starting to get some really good base level data. So we're starting to get the basic engagement metrics. And a lot of that was driven by the need for showing return on investment, let's be blunt, to the earlier point about greater investment in these areas. And a lot more is needed, let's be very blunt. But now for some of the more, the organizations that have been doing it 5, 8, 10 years, you're now able to take it to the next level. And this is a conversation I've had often with some of the leaders at CASE, is what I call outcome metrics. So how can you now track the activities and engagement of your alumni and your constituents and show how that is directly impacting the mission of the institution through the strategic plan? So taking the university or K, or the private school or the college's strategic plan and looking at the different components of it, pulling it apart and saying, okay, in what areas can we bring lift? So say to Sandra's earlier point about international, if that's a big area of focus and international student recruitment or international research partnerships are a big area, you can track that with your data if you have a robust program to your alumni engagement activities or your donor engagement. And thus you can show that you're bringing lift to that. So that's what I call outcome metrics. A lot of what we're tracking in the early sort of the low-hanging fruit of metrics is outputs, is just, does someone come to an event? Well, that's great that they showed up, but what does that do? You want to show that that's had impact. And so that takes a much richer data set. So that's where we're sort of getting to in a more sophisticated way. The other is using metrics, and that's the title of today's talk, for just so many other things. So instead of just showing, here's the number of alumni we're engaging, the number of activities that are engaging in, et cetera, you're now able to look at these really rich data sets, especially if you're getting data from across your organization, to start to do things like to tailor your communications, to use it, matching it with artificial intelligence and driving your communications and your asks. It could be for time, for talent, or for treasure, to your constituents, and really engaging them in a very holistic and, so like I would say like an Amazon type way, right? So in effect, it's very much, we're sort of in the very early days. It's sort of like when Amazon only sold books. And, back in those days, if we said, well, Amazon's going to know what type of, hair dryer you need or use, we would, what? That's where we're in such early days in this metrics conversation that we're really in the book selling stage of Amazon. I want to get us to 3-4 years down the road where we're in that super sophisticated AI driven, just intuitive experience for our constituents, because we're using the data, because we have systems to get data from across the campus, not just within our advancement sphere. And then we're really going to crush it, and that's what's exciting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It kind of makes me think about a few things around, well, what do alumni, like, what do alumni need from the universities? And there was a question, we're going to come to this question from Thomas around on engagement activities with young alumni, not so young alumni. And it's sort of identifying the value in a life cycle. And we might not have time to get to this, but I think it could warrant another interesting conversation around the life cycle of alumni, from recent graduate perhaps to somebody that's graduated 50 years ago, and what is the value of the institution to them. And those outcome metrics could play a pivotal part in that. Sandra, anything?
No, I was going to mention that I really like that concept of the outcome matrix, Barney. And I totally agree with you that artificial intelligence is going to really drive us to the next level. There is that we will be able to facilitate and engage alumni at the different levels, be able to segment them better and be able to meet their needs at their different levels in the cycle, right? And levels of engagement, because I do think that there are different levels of engagement, and we need to build up those. Right now, we're measuring more in terms of what is it that they look at, right? Or what's their interest, but not in terms of how do you get them to use those values that they have, use that knowledge, and bring it into your mentoring program, into your lectures, into the curriculum and internships, whatever, so definitely I think that that will move us forward. And probably the most important thing I think that will help us the most, which is what's been always very difficult, is that internal sharing of information. That is so hard, isn't it? It's so hard with all the departments and have them work together. So if that in itself would help that, I would be so happy.
You mean
totally
you mean
agree.
departments speaking to each other? Is that what you mean,
Yeah, I
Sandra?
That's
so
hearsay. Hearsay.
Yeah.
the hardest job, right, Barney, is not so much engaging the alumni, is actually getting the case for support internally. And a lot of the programs, disappear, or, a good volunteering program disappears because, we're engaging the alumni and helping, international students for whatever. But nobody else knows that that's happening. The marketing department doesn't know. The admissions department doesn't even know. And so what happens is there's no support. And we need money to train these students or these alumni and whatnot. Bring them here. Re-engage them. Well, no, sorry. What did you do? We got so many volunteers, but that's not good enough. So yeah. So that communication and working towards common goals, that's one of the big struggles internally
is getting data. And one of the, it's exciting. A lot of organizations going to Salesforce. I know we are, and that as an institution, it gets onto a platform like that. It's easier to get the data, which is awesome. It's also great to have products, like, Hivebrite, where you're providing a service for campus partners who may not be in the same data sphere that you're in, but by giving them, a product that can really help them engage their folks, you can start to get that data. It's all about getting the data. And again, back to that Amazon thing of just selling books. It's about knowing the whole experience and doing what I call, we all call it constituent mapping, right? I'm just working on that right now, where you look at one constituent and look at all the universe of university ways, or a school or whoever that they're interacting with, like the bookstore, and maybe the School of the Arts for the, buying tickets to the symphony, whatever it is. You need all that data to understand what they're truly doing and where their passions lie.
Yeah, and what professor they might be speaking to, because sometimes, although we don't, again, another interesting conversation and potentially out of this scope, but sometimes alumni are very driven to their professor and they'll engage with them, but won't even talk to the alumni office, for example.
Oh, completely.
So it's
absolutely.
So it's knowing how to get to help you with your metrics, right? To help with your data.
And often the professors have lists of their favorite alumni that they've stayed in touch with, sometimes 20, 30 years, and they may be asking them to mentor or talk in classrooms, but they're not sharing that data because either, there's walls up or they don't have an easy system to do it.
Correct. Or sometimes we all know that some alumni relations teams can be a little bit protective of their data as well, which never heard of that.
Crazy talk.
Yeah.
Crazy talk.
Scandalous. So I think we need to keep pushing on a little bit. So thanks for that. Look, I did want to ask quickly just around the craft of alumni engagement, though I think that we kind of answered that already, just around how that's shifting and changing, and how we've seen that. And I think it was to Thomas's question around, it is a craft, and you got to know how to engage with alumni at different levels. Young alumni versus older alumni, those alumni that might not necessarily be engaged, and understanding that's okay. I think there is a craft to it. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit on that, just for 30 seconds each.
Sandra, go for it.
Well, for me, I think that training people who are going to work in that field is essential. We assume that because we're all humans, we can build relationships. It's a job about relationship building, and it really needs professional training for that. And in that sense, I think that organizations like KPIs are fundamental to help us get there. When I first started, it was KPIs where I went and got all the information, the training, and it was really facilitated and empowered me in many ways. So organizations like that, and making sure that universities know they exist and that they send their people to be trained first. So for me, that's like a basic that a lot of times top management in universities do not realize how important that is, and they just move people around and not necessarily people that understand that that's a profession.
And Barney, 30 seconds for you. No pressure.
It's a dark art, but it's now evolving. And now what it's got to move to, and we're seeing that, and it's a long way to go, is moving to a space of getting out of the middle, of using technology to scale engagement. And also, I think we're starting to see quite clearly a different take of engaging constituents beyond alumni. So to take that skill set of alumni engagement and to use it to engage parents, to engage friends of the university, ticket holders, sports tickets holders, et cetera. So that sort of concept, as Sandra's talking about, that sort of bringing them into the hug of the institution is expanding. So it's very exciting, but it's got to be driven with technology. And that's a different mindset, it's a different skill set, and it's a different budget allocation from events, et cetera, to technology.
That's great. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for answering those. I'm going to move to Sandra a little bit now, and sort of more your work, Sandra, focused over in the EU there. And I think this is really interesting to hear, because sometimes I guess the US is very focused on what the US is doing, and had probably been considered leaders in especially the advancement world and development worlds and engaging alumni, though Europe is doing some fantastic things out there, and spearheaded by folks like yourself. So the question here is around what are the outcomes what are the outcomes the EU is looking for, and how are you tracking that?
The EU, you mean?
The EU, yeah, as your work in the EU.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about the EU Alumni Initiative, and it's a young initiative. It's just started. So let me give you just a little bit in terms of background of what that is. I'm excited to be part of that project because it speaks loudly of the importance of engaging international alumni, not only for the institution, but also, for public diplomacy. So this is moving alumni relations beyond the needs of the institution to the needs of countries and in a region like the EU in terms of public diplomacy. The project itself is actually to support EU delegations. EU delegations are all over the world, and in engaging the alumni, the EU alumni locally. So right now it's just starting, is in the process of developing a platform that will facilitate that EU alumni will register. And EU alum is somebody who has received funding from the EU to study in Europe. So now they need to set up and start the database that will allow the KPIs for each of the countries to develop their own strategy or how they will engage their local EU alumni. So it's in the starting phase. But if you look at other countries that have been doing this for a while, I'm talking about Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, the UK, even Fulbright, that have these large global, what I call global networks that are managed not by a university but by a government, or a governmental organization that has been given the mandate to, okay, we want these global networks. They have been primarily set up, to keep engaging with the country brand, to help with public diplomacy and to help promote higher education. And you see that this trend is primarily in Europe. Now you're beginning to see other countries starting to move in that space. But it started because international higher education, or the internationalization of higher education, became actually an industry. And people needed, to go and promote. Well, why are you going to study in Poland, in English? So you got to promote Poland, and you got to promote the universities there. Same goes with Hungary, or same goes with any of the countries in Europe. So this was kind of a movement that these countries, these large countries like Germany, in particular, in France, saw as an opportunity to brand the country, connect with those scholar fellows who had received money from the country, and start engaging them. And so it's been primarily to promote higher education, brand the country and help build bridges for public diplomacy, where education, higher education, is one of those pillars of public diplomacy. So so in that sense, it's interesting that trend, and I've been interested in I started following it more than 10 years ago in terms of how this is going, and countries, like Poland and Israel, Taiwan, they're trying to develop this concept of country alumni. So Germany alumni, Netherlands alumni, French alumni, France alumni. So that's.
And so how are they tracking it though? What are the ways that they're tracking? What are they tracking here? What are the outcomes they're looking to track?
Well, they see it as a long-term investment, and they see it as more in terms of building collaboration to mobilize, or for civic engagement, for actually now to implement or help them mobilize the sustainable development goals. So the United Nations SDGs are core to a lot of these networks. So what you were talking about, Barney, in terms of looking at the value system of the alum, and how to engage them in a greater picture, in other ways. I think that these networks are going to show us how alumni get involved in these social projects. A lot of them are involved in social projects, in sustainable projects that going to help us save ourselves from this planet, right? So in order to, I think that they will have enough data there that will help us as we do. We need to do the research. It's not enough. But I think that right now a lot of these networks are primarily focusing on engaging and maintaining the contact with the alumni, and getting them encouraged and empowered to set up a lot of social work, social development initiatives. And you see
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And what do you think there's anything that the US can learn from either that model, though that's a little bit more difficult because the US obviously is a much larger country than countries in Europe, and has a different approach. Do you think there's anything that the US, that has sort of been seen as the leader, could actually learn from Europe and what they're doing?
For the US to have one, US alumni network is difficult, because every state has a different education system in a way, right? And so so you have the Fulbright, which is probably something similar in a way that connects people immediately with the US, and they could tap into that. But I think that what I always like about our colleagues in alumni relations is the sharing of experiences, and regardless of where you are, whether you're in an institution, in school, or at this level of country and whatever, some of the issues are very similar. How do you engage internally? How do you create a case for support internally? And how do you find out what really appeals to the alumni, and how do you maintain that engagement so that they find your organization relevant? And I think that those are relevant questions to anybody, any organization. And by sharing our experiences, we come up with innovative ways. But it's not only from colleagues in the same education system or that, but also coming from corporate. What you're saying in terms of the Amazon experience of artificial intelligence. Well, we're going to have to be learning a lot from corporate and nonprofit will be learning. We can learn much better from nonprofit in terms of how they engage their volunteers, and they actually create a good volunteering management program that empowers every time, and people feel that they're contributing to a greater cause, right? Which is what touches the values. So
no, that's really insightful. Though I do want to say, Amazon's great, but Alexa still has a lot of room for improvement. She doesn't always get it right. So I really, really insightful. Barney, I've got to jump into some more questions, but is there anything you'd like to add to what Sandra just mentioned?
Well, you asked about the US, and my experience is that the Canadian government does quite a good job at engaging alumni internationally, and they're quite strategic about that. I haven't yet experienced that at a national level in the States, and I've done quite a bit of work of this in Asia and Korea and other countries for universities. But I do find that the consulates do a good job in country. But I haven't seen a national American strategy of we need alumni to help us with this, nor at the state level. And again, in Canada, say in British Columbia, they've had a number of initiatives. Some were not successful, but some have been a little bit successful. So I haven't seen that strategic engagement of alumni. But what they do also have is the chambers of commerce. And so say the Beijing Chamber of Commerce does a very good job at engaging with large university alumni groups. And so there are, it's just a bit spottier, sort of. But, I like Sandra's coming from a EU strategic perspective, and I think that's really exciting because there's so much that can be done.
Well, let's move on, because we've got about 25 minutes, and we want to give this some great questions. And just to come back to everybody that is on the call, we're going to get to these questions at the end. There's some really great questions here that we want to come to around other kind of benchmarking outside of case, so they're doing a great job. So we want to come to those and leave some time at the end. I just want to circle back, and we were talking at the very beginning around cases, and we talked about the work that CASE does. I want to circle back to that for a minute around this universal framework and why that can be great. And there is a need to unify the standards in the industry. I wanted you both talk a little bit about the benefits of universal standards and some of those shortcomings. And, I can open that up by seeing it myself working with universities, and I'll talk about a little bit this in a moment. Though working with universities perhaps have 20,000 alumni, they're very much focused on centralized spaces for folks to engage through jobs, through networking, and through potentially mentoring. Though you have the very large institutions, potentially with 100,000, have very established communities within those, such as groups or clubs or chapters. So benchmarking can be different, and can mean different things. So I'd like you to, if you can, and Barney, if you'd like to start just talking around the benefits of using something like CASE framework, and maybe potentially some of the shortfalls there as well.
I think some of the challenges that in alumni relations we've always experienced, just our work touches so many areas of the alumni experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's been hard to measure, but we're always up against the very clean metric of dollars. And that's always been the challenge. And what I love about the benchmark and about the work that they're doing is that we can start to get to a fairly clean metric of what's your percentage of alumni engaged in a meaningful way and measurable way. So that is fantastic. And I think we need to stay very focused on that. And I mean, at the highest level, it would be great if, and I know there's some lobbying going on to try and get US News and World Reports or Times Higher Education to start bringing that into the conversation, because they do the percentage of alumni giving, but that is, to me, is only the tip of the iceberg. So I think we all need to really focus and do a good work on this benchmarking as a community, and then push to have that as a standard. And of course, there's downsides to it. You could have people sort of gaming the system as they do a bit with percentage of alumni giving. But I think the pros outweigh the cons.
Sandra, I guess this is just the same question to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I agree with Barney. And, always the issue is, I mean, when we started in the Netherlands, when I started the program at Tilburg University, there wasn't much in terms of benchmarking, so that it was really useful to have some sort of benchmarking in order for us to be able to present the program to the rector and the president, and get finances that we needed to support that. And then you always need to be able to show that indeed, the return on investment, what is that? So that's why the metrics are always so fundamental. But it's always a dilemma because alumni relations is about relations and relationship building, right? And how do you really fully measure that? And it's always a long-term vision and investment. And we've been, our cultures, economic cultures are, short term, and you show, return on investment really fast. And so that's always the dilemma. So having something basic, I think, is very helpful, especially when you're starting a program, to be able to, start from zero and build it and have a benchmark. It needs to allow, of course, for diversity, like everything,
Yeah.
that is a reality. But I think that's a good starting point.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like it's quantitative statistics, which is great for alumni relations, which sometimes is a qualitative business in terms of conversations and outreach and those kinds of things, which, they can go hand in hand, though sometimes it can cause friction. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dilemma.
Yeah, that is a dilemma. So I think we're kind of coming towards the end-ish, but I believe you had some questions for me as well. I think it's time to turn the tables and throw me on the hot seat. So I'm happy to hear those and see what you've got for me.
I'll start with one, then Sandra can go. I'm curious because you work in both, you have feet in both camps, of both the nonprofit alumni side and also the corporate alumni side. And I'm wondering what you see from your corporate clients that your alumni clients can benefit from.
From the corporate clients, for what alumni can benefit from? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like what are you learning in your corporate work?
What are the differences there?
What translates?
Yeah.
What's value that we can learn from?
They're very different, but they're also similar. And it really comes down to corporate alumni communities are wanting different things, but similar things, right? Their ROI, their monetization, I guess you can call it, for a corporate community. And I'll give you a couple of examples, like the New York Stock Exchange, for example. They work with us through a board diversity program they have. And we have Cozen O'Connor, which is very much around law alumni and connecting their alumni together. So their monetization is it's going to be their kind of ROI is going to be very similar. It's, how are we engaging our alumni? Are we getting folks to events? How happy is our community? But they're kind of what they get back. And I guess, as you would say, Barney, the outcome metrics, it could be around business connections or genuine direct new line of revenue for the company. They could be looking, Cozen O'Connor could be looking for those alumni to go out to different firms and get business from those firms because they're keeping good connections from them, right? Or it could be they're looking to hire people back through boomerang hires, or you move into a C-level position and other C-levels who could come back and work at your company, at the company, for example. So it's a little bit different, yet they're still sometimes approaching it. And I had an interesting conversation. I won't name drop the client, but they were telling me, actually, for higher education, sometimes they see higher ed and what they're doing as the thought leaders of the industry in regards to volunteer management and how alumni relation teams engage with their constituents. Because that's what you do, right? In alumni relations, you're engaging, where corporate alumni have been a bit slower to the game. It's been a bit more traditional, cocktail event, that kind of thing. So it's a different field. And inversely, I feel like corporate alumni are going to learn from higher ed and what they're doing out there.
That's great.
Does that help answer the question?
That's good.
Yeah,
I think it's good. I think we have a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah. And I always think that, meeting those intersections of bringing people from corporate, for example, as an idea for another webinar, to share what they do would be fantastic for us to be able to hear from higher education. I think that's very.
There's definitely some. Yeah, there's some.
Hearing different perspectives always, at least for me, it just kind of gets my brain going and thinking, how could I use this for that and stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So having these different clients that have sort of different needs, has Hivebrite re-engineered some of their elements in the platform that or anything that's coming, you know, in the future for?
Well, I think it's been more of a learning, especially for like in higher education, right? And I can speak specifically to this because we're really talking about alumni, and there may be some corporate alumni folks here as well. But it's been a real learning curve to understand exactly what it means for, and I think I spoke about it before, what it means for an alumni shop of one. I can think of a university I worked with that was an alumni shop of one, and they're now a client of ours with 70,000 alumni to look after. Their needs and what they do and how they approached it, I thought was really interesting. So instead of having lots of chapters and groups and affinity clubs, they were very departmental focused. So their school of nursing was really engaged. Their athletics department was very engaged with their alumni. So they leveraged these departments to actually help build engagement by, utilizing Hivebrite. But it was just a different way of learning of how folks would engage. And then you look at the University of Notre Dame, for example, who works with us. They're very big with chapters, clubs, affinity groups, and they build a lot of culture around that from the very beginning. So it's been about learning that and adapting the platform to be able to suit those different needs. And I spoke, for example, for a university that has a size of 20,000 alumni, a very small shop. They're not going to have 100 chapters and groups and clubs. That's not going to be really big for them. What's big for them is how can they use alumni as student ambassadors, which applies to a lot of universities as ambassadors to do student recruitment. How can they mentor current students, providing opportunities? It's much more global and across the board to engage with the university as a whole, as instead of like chapters, groups, and different departments. So sort of learning that and allowing us to adopt the technology to kind of cater for that is what we've been working very hard at. So it's incredibly interesting how you continue to learn. It's a non-stop learning field, higher education and alumni relations. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of the questions of us in the panel here. We've had some great questions come through the board, and I'm going to try and get to these. I'm going to come back up to the top, and I feel, Thomas, I think we answered you around sort of the young alumni, not so young alumni. Somebody would like us to share some of the case metrics, which I think we're going to do. We can follow up with an email with that. So Brooke here has a question about, do your alumni relation teams carry non-solicitation engagement-based portfolios as a means to increasing engagement, connection, and also generating metrics? Anyone happy to take that one, Barney?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about that. And actually, at Vanderbilt, a number of our annual giving folks in our giving department are actually measured on engagement versus dollars. So when we look at reunions and we look at some of our sorry, the other one's gone right out of my head. I'm just learning, it's week 2. There it's all about participation. So we really focus on participation, and I'm actually, as I learn about it more and get into it, I'm really impressed by how much of what our annual giving team is really about engagement. So, I mean, we're bringing the two groups together, but we're going to be just doing away with this concept of, alumni's over there and annual giving is over here. It's all together engaging our constituents. And I'm very impressed by what I'm seeing so far. So it is really important, but I've always said it's really important that the annual giving folk, our fundraising folks have alumni metrics, and that our alumni folks have development metrics about, surfacing prospects and, starting and, working at sort of the leadership annual giving level in effect. So I really think, when we each have each other's metrics, we each have each other's backs, and that's really important.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know if the term I've heard these days is return on engagement, and ROE, not an ROI, is what a lot of folks look for. Yeah. It's I think it defines it really well. I'm going to give the next one then to Sandra. I want to come to you. And this one is around, this is from Jesse. Thank you, Jesse, for your question. Other than cases, outstanding work, benchmarking alumni engagement, are you aware of any other tools or measurements that are out there that have been used to measure alumni engagement?
Honestly, I mean, I think that universities do develop their own, KPIs and decide which elements they will have, but published that I know of, I don't know. Barney, do you know?
No, I was looking at that question earlier, like, no, I don't. But what where I went in my head is some systems and programs and technology like Hivebrite, et cetera, are enabling you to do that. So it's sort of like we have, yes, the case metrics of that program, but we also now are starting to see our technology partners give us the tools versus us having to develop themselves. So it's a little bit tangential. So I haven't seen another standard, if you will, other than, like you say, Sandra, this is a bit of a love fest, Sandra. We have to disagree on something soon, but we are within schools are creating our own that are, targeted, but really, no, I've never seen a competing one to CASE, if you will. But I do like that our technology partners are starting to support us and give us dashboards of our metrics, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's just, I wanted to keep on that theme. This is a question from Laura, and I'm doing this a little bit out of sequence, but I think it kind of helps around, Laura's asking sort of about tips that you could both give to somebody that's looking to track engagement from zero. So if someone's starting at square one, where do they start, and what are sort of the key things that you would say, the kind of top level metrics that you would apply to, or engagement that they would look for?
Yeah.
Sandra?
Sandra, do you want to?
I mean, I started the program for international alumni relations from zero at Tilburg University. And what I did was, again, you have to go back to your strategy, and what are the objectives, what are the goals that you want to achieve, and then, how can that measurement can support those objectives. So our international alumni relations program was to support the internationalization of the university. So I looked at number of international, we set up an ambassadors program to help us recruit students internationally. So, we had a target within that ambassadors program of how many students we would bring in per year. And these were activities that we did as an alumni office, and it was not, the marketing department and the recruiters, but we worked together with the recruiters, and we helped as well. We trained the ambassadors with the recruiters, and the recruiters met them and knew them. So that we supported setting up alumni chapters in strategic countries where internationalization was going to be more in depth, meaning more exchange programs, more programs, research programs developed. And so there were like 5 countries that were definitely key to that. And there we set up chapters, and we managed those chapters. Those chapters also had a particular target, matrix as well. So there was a whole system. So I think it's always look at what is it that you want to support in advance, and how does that, and measure what is going to show that you have supported the strategy. How have you supported the strategy?
Anything to add to that, Barney?
Yeah, I totally agree. I know, as always. But I just say keep it simple. Like don't stress about it. What data do you already have? So yeah, it's all back to your strategy. But what do you got? And just start with that. Keep it simple and make it. It's always going to change. And some people get wound up about, whoa, then it's not a comparable benchmark. Well, yeah, whatever. Like it's really about building your program, right? So take what you got, and if you're starting from scratch, be really proud of that you're able to track whatever the stuff that you have at the end of the first year, and also create narratives around your data. Tell that story, and as you tell the story, that's going to help you get more resources. So be really proud of what you've created, and then shamelessly tell the story of it. And if it's not perfect, who cares? It's only alumni engagement. Like, we're not saving babies here. Like, it's okay. Don't take it too seriously.
What if you're a medical school though? Maybe you are.
Oh, that's different.
Then
you take it.
So I think there was a question here, and it was from somebody from the group here, asking around data specialists. And I've seen this a little bit, though it hasn't ever been really tailored to alumni. I've seen it's more around university metrics, student surveys and the like. Hasn't been so tailored to alumni. So the question is around sort of the lack of that data specialist within alumni organizations and how that might improve, because that's really important to, to really measuring metrics, right? Is having somebody out there can understand this, analyze it, and help you build that out. Some comments or thoughts on that?
I'll jump there. I mean, when I saw the question, I just smiled. Like, this is, it's one of the upsides of the horrible year of 2020 and COVID and how that's just made everybody scramble. Notice I haven't used the word that starts with P. That we are starting to reallocate resources. We're realizing that we have to invest in technology. We realize we've got to, understand our data. And I think that in 2 years, we're probably going to see the makeup of alumni engagement departments be very different. I think, one of the first hires I want is a digital strategist. I want someone who that's all they think about. And I need analysts. If the data is worth nothing if we can't use it, and you need analysts to do that. So that is just super important. And you can also do that with partnerships in the university. I mean, that's a really important thing. And sometimes with other departments, and often, the development department has more on the analyst side, but actually not many do even there. So that's a big area. So this is a huge area of growth. So I love that question. They nailed it.
Yeah, they're all really great questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get to all of them. I've been asked to just pick one more quick question and then wrap. But this question is kind of hard to do quickly. But I want to ask it because Eric kindly posted it a little while ago. And it's what are the biggest challenges in balancing the incentive of cultivating long-term intangibles of engagement versus the clean metric of immediate dollars, which I think is a really great question and something that I think everyone struggles with.
Yeah. Sandra, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about that the whole time.
Yeah, we have.
This is the dilemma, right? It's about building, how do you measure a friendship? There we go.
In Australia, that's a little easier. It's how many beers you buy me, but yeah.
There you go. I mean, what Barney said when we were talking about, if you're starting from scratch, what do you do, right? Is it's for me at least is tell the story, tell the story of what you're measuring and why you're measuring and how that measurement actually advances the institution or advances the strategy of the institution. And like I said, back with me, international alumni relations was like 2% of the whole, alumni constituencies. So, for them to give me money, what they consider a very expensive program for what it was, I had to show that I was bringing in, dollars or euros in this case, right? So I counted the number of students that were coming in through the program. So think about, ways that will allow you to do the engagement in terms of relationship building, but also you're able to show, look, if it weren't for my program, we wouldn't have as many internships, or we wouldn't have as many mentors, or we wouldn't have, as many students. We were able to bring in so many students. We were able to support, blah, 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 blah. That would be my perspective. What about you, Barney? What do you say?
Yeah,
it's really about
30 seconds, Barney, because we'll have to,
2 words, long tail.
Long tail.
That's all.
Great.
Long tail strategy.
Yeah, long tail strategy. I think we're good. Yeah, I would thank you so much for answering those questions. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everybody that joined the call. We had some great attendance during this and some really wonderful questions. Thomas, we didn't get to all your questions, but we will come back to you on those because I thought you had some great ones, especially around the idea of how delivered locally versus would a national initiative work here in the US. I think that's an interesting question. So we're going to be sharing some feedback for the survey in the chat. I think it might have been popped there already if I don't already see it. So thank you for joining. I just want to kind of let you know that we are going to be having a webinar again with Notre Dame, and it's going to be something it's going to be something around sort of how they built and scaled a successful donation process while focusing on long-term donor engagement, which actually comes to that question about long tail. We want to get these immediate dollars in, but we also want to make sure we're cultivating long-term, whether that's dollars or engagement. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you, Barney. Thank you, Sandra. It's great as always. Barney, I look forward to following you in your new role over at Vanderbilt. I think that's super exciting, and I can't wait to hear about the great things you're going to do there. Sandra, I can't wait for your book, and it'll be on the bookshelf as soon as it gets here, and I can't wait to read it as well. Yep, no worries. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks very much.
Really appreciate your time. No problems. It was great.
Yeah, Barney was great.
Thank you. It's great. We have to disagree on something, Sandra, soon.
Yeah,
we'll get together.
Yeah. I know you were too easy. You were too easy. It was too easy. It was too wonderful.
That's fine.
I should
I'm happy to answer
questions.
Any questions we didn't get to. I'm happy to answer those. Sandra and I can share the on an email, and we're happy to respond.
That would be great.
So nice
yeah, we
can
able
to do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay, great. Thanks, Barney. Thanks, Sandra. Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye.